almost want to make you sit on that queue for as long as it takes for the super loud Ralph Wiggum thing to come through, and then now you have to sit there pointing at the screen like an asshole while I don't say anything.
This is why you watch the YouTube version, folks.
Yeah, there you go. For all these sight gags that are great for the iTunes subscribers. Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of We the Nerdies, Nerdflix and Chill. I'm Gary Theroux, and over there is Sean Capri.
I'm Sean Capri. Hi, Gary Theroux.
Are you to my left or my right, or how? I don't know. I have no idea how this works.
We're kind of like mirrored, so we're just pointing fingers at each other.
Touching tips? Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I'm so glad to be talking to you about this week because we watched a movie that I never would have seen had we not been doing this in the theaters, and I think we both came up with strong opinions, if not the exact same opinion. And then our 6 Degrees of Con Air game, which is now so far removed from Con Air that it doesn't make sense anymore, but 6 Degrees, as it were, took us to The Departed, and I just watched it last night, and I took more notes watching that movie than I have for the last 3 weeks of 6 Degrees movies we've watched, which means that, yeah, we definitely watched a good movie this time. I had nothing to say about Kingpin and Me, Myself, and Irene, other than they were good or they were bad or whatever, and I'm really looking forward to our deep dive into The Departed this week. So how about you? Excited for this week or what?
I'm excited. It's a whole Italian kind of weird Departed celebration, except that it's about a movie about Irish people with Leonardo DiCaprio and that other Italian guy in it that I'm told. Oh, Martin Scorsese, who directed it.
Oh,
I'm like, wait a minute. None of those other actors are Italian. Why do I think this
not
is
a single
Italian?
one. They're all doing bad Boston Irish accents.
One of them does an okay one, but yeah, you're right. It's mostly bad, and one of the guys doesn't even try for it, but that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like it. I'm glad that we're going to have at least a balance here. It kind of helps me keep my sanity in that we can watch a really terrible movie in the theaters and then watch probably what will go down as one of the all-time greatest movies ever made.
Yeah, it's got to be on one of those lists somewhere, right? Like, I think I recently looked at IMDb's top 200, and it's still Shawshank number 1, and then both of the Godfathers, I think, are 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
One number 1 and 2. And I can't remember what order, although I personally think
Armageddon number 4.
Armageddon's, I have my doubts that Armageddon's number 4. But maybe you could just, like, spam their review algorithm with like super positive 5-star reviews for Armageddon until you get it climbing up the list.
Okay, I've got my work phone here. I'm going to log in on this one. I've got my personal phone here. I'm going to log in. I'm going to have at least 2.
You're going to see how high you can get Armageddon by the end of the podcast.
Let's do this as a community. Everybody, I want you all in on this. Let's get Armageddon up there. After you rate our show on iTunes, go ahead and go into...
Yes, after we get our 5-star review.
Yeah, that would be great.
And as one of our podcasts, one of our favorite podcasts says, we don't care what you write in a review.
Pretty much.
So long as it's 5 stars. And that's you end up with fuck Nerdflix and Chill. 5 stars. And I don't mind stealing that. So yes, welcome to yet another edition. And we're excited to go through this, like I said. And what we always start with in these episodes are the theater experience. What did we see? And we got to see this movie together, which we haven't done in a little while. And we got a couple of new trailers, which was awesome. I was thinking a movie like this would give us trailers for another movie like this, sort of a new franchise, tentpole, something from the gaming industry. But I don't know if there's anything else coming out like that. And the first new trailer that we got is something that I remember hearing it was being made, but no early buzz. Like, just here's your fully completed preview for a movie called Deepwater Horizon, based on the actual events of the BP oil spill a few years back, starring Mark Wahlberg and who else?
That's all that I remember from the trailer, and this is showing that I am not as prepared as I sometimes am. I don't know who else is in this. I didn't even know this was being made into a movie. I feel like this is coming out of like the school of the 9/11 disaster movies that came out, sort of like, do we make a movie out of this and make money off of this horrible, horrible disaster? This struck me as being quite weird. I don't remember a single moment when that was happening, where anybody was pitched as being a hero. I don't remember there being a single silver lining to the BP oil spill. I remember just being horrible, horrible news.
Well, and my recollection of the news story is that all the news was about the environmental impact and
Yes.
the time it took to plug the leak. And this movie is not about that. If you haven't seen this trailer that we're talking about, it is about the beginning of the crisis, the actual bursting of that deep sea well, and the explosion that took place on the Deepwater Horizon. And without cheating by Googling or anything like that, I know that story of the lives lost and the explosion was definitely lost in the shuffle in the coverage of the ridiculous amount of environmental damage that was being done by that much oil spilling directly into the ocean. And I feel the same way as you did, which I don't remember this part of the story. It's not like, what was the Antonio Banderas Chilean miners movie called last year? Was it just called The 13 or something like that?
I
or
think
the
it was
33?
Assassins 2.
Assassins 2. Antonio Banderas and Sylvester
Sylvester Stallone
are trapped in a cave and still can't hit each other, even though they're supposedly the world's greatest assassins.
I don't know why nobody lets us make a movie.
Yeah, well, if we could write the Assassins 2 script, I'm sure we'd get blacklisted right away.
The only thing worse that could have been worse about this movie is if at the very end it's like sponsored by Castrol GTX.
Synthetics make your engine run longer.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I saw the preview, and like I say, you got Mark Wahlberg's, he's Skyping with his kids, and seems to be a family man who's going to experience.
With Kate Hudson as his wife.
Kate Hudson? Okay, so yeah, he's gonna fight to stay alive for the sake of his family, and it seems like they're gonna ignore all those repercussions after the fact. It's not a story about big oil and the machinations behind the scenes. They're making this huge historical event into a smaller story, and they're going to talk about the men on the rig itself. And while I can't say I'm convinced this is going to be Oscar worthy or anything like that, it seems like that's the way they're going. They're going about character. They're releasing it, I think, in November, and they're going to go for a sort of a smaller character-driven story. And I would say, based on this, a less than fully enthusiastic see it. I'm in for this movie. I will go, while I may not be counting the days on my Lent calendar to this movie. I will go see it.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I did one of those like headcock moments where as soon as they said it, I'm still stuck on the whole like these guys are heroes, and I kind of went like, did we really think that? I gotta see. I'm mostly intrigued on like how they spin that. I realize that they're all kind of there to save each other, so this is kind of like the Armageddon meets Titanic meets United 93 movie.
Okay, wow.
You know, because of the drilling from Armageddon. And
I got the Armageddon part of it.
Yeah.
Hopefully Liv Tyler runs around this one too.
Yeah, I think she's... Anyway, wow. I'll look for a third... stick around, folks. I'll try and sneak Armageddon in for a third one. I'm in for a seat as well. But also, just to bring it back to your Oscar mentions, like, I wasn't even thinking that based on the trailer, but you obviously maybe know a little more from kind of behind the scenes information.
Just based on true story released at that time of year, and then there was a real opportunity here, just based on what we know, which is a 90-second trailer. You easily could have given this script to like Roland Emmerich and have him film it like 2012 or San Andreas or The Day After Tomorrow and make this a disaster survival movie. And it seems like they're not doing that. They're going to tug at the heartstrings. They're going to make it about survival on the rig itself and make the story smaller, which may not get you an Oscar if the performances don't live up to your idea, but probably good enough for a Golden Globe. You can just pay for those.
I was thinking, you know, I'm coming around to this idea. The part that really fell apart for me on the Oscar part is when the oil coagulated into like this weird monster thing, and it went up to Mark Wahlberg and said, "Look at me, look at me. I'm the captain now." It was so weird. Like I don't know if that's Oscar for me.
It's a directorial choice for sure. Yeah,
very strange.
You had to commit to that idea.
CGI's come a long way.
So we're both saying see it without maybe being that enthusiastic. So it's definitely something we're interested in. So the other new trailer that we haven't spoken about on the show we saw, and I've been hearing about this for a long, long time. I'm sure it's been in front of a lot of kids' movies, but it was the animated feature, The Secret Lives of Pets. And I laughed out loud a couple points, especially when the poodle at the end of the trailer turns on System of a Down and starts headbanging at the end of the preview. It's like, I'm down for that, if nothing else, if that's all that happens in this movie.
This is I don't know if it's been talked about really, but this is basically like Toy Story for animals.
Yes.
Where like they come to life, they all have these weird personalities, and kind of blowing up what we know about all the different breeds of animals, just kind of personifying that, I think is going to be really neat. I didn't even realize, they're just looking up just now, like who's voice acting in this movie. Kevin Hart, Louis C.K. Like, I had absolutely no idea, but this trailer definitely made me laugh out loud. This is I don't even care what else is coming out at the same time. I'm absolutely seeing this movie. This is like made for. I live in a house of pets. Like, there are more pets in this house than there are human beings in our house. So I would love to just kind of imagine this is what they do while we're away at work.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very fun, and I think it's going to continue the tradition that kind of started with some of the early Pixar stuff, maybe even a movie like Shrek as well, where you start making these family movies that are maybe marketed towards kids, but they want to entertain the parents and the adults who come see them as well. And I think there's going to be a lot of humor for everybody in a movie like this, and yeah, definitely a see it for me as well, because the trailer is funny. Like you say, the list of cast. You didn't even mention Jenny Slate and Ellie Kemper and Lake Bell, who are more sort of indie stars. You know, your Netflix smaller shows. The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is Ellie Kemper's show, and they've definitely got sort of kitschy fan bases, cliquey fan bases who might come out and support a movie like this that, like I say, isn't necessarily geared to their demographic. So,
see, I think it's the opposite. I think this is like their launching pad. They've kind of been doing that smaller stuff. This is them going to the next level.
I got you. And you very well may be right about that, but I think the one thing we can both agree on is that this is just going to absolutely rake the cash. Like,
yes.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, we're talking about a Marvel type opening probably. Like, I don't know what Minions did last year, but these franchise style eagerly anticipated, like, long campaigns for advertising, these things are crushing opening weekends now, like they're big tentpole superhero movies, and I think this is just going to continue that.
Yeah, there's some, like, with a lot of these animated movies, sometimes you can tell before they even come out, like, that something is missing there. This does look like it's got tons of heart. It looks like, oh, Kevin Hart, I didn't even mean to do that. Ah, that's so lame. Puns are awesome.
I love that you think it's a lame pun, and yet a movie we're going to discuss the possibility of seeing next week used it as part of their ad campaign. A Little Heart and a Big Johnson was the actual slug line for Central Intelligence, and you shamed yourself by accidentally saying it.
I would shame myself if I was the one who thought, if I was a marketing genius who came up with that Central Intelligence line too. But there's something about this movie, it just seems like it's a guaranteed success. It's going to be, sometimes it seems like movies, maybe you don't know, this seems like if it's not excellent, I'll be disappointed.
Yeah, and well, like you say, in terms of sort of guaranteed success to a certain extent, it may not get a Pixar-style 90-plus rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but in terms of overall sort of positive review ratings, it's going to have to be up there, because I want to meet the sourpuss asshole who's watching this thing with his arms folded, like, fuck this shit. Like, why? What about this is turning you off? Like, is it the great comic actors? Is it the fun childlike sense of humor? Like, I don't know who's gonna sit there and poo-poo this.
Pets aren't people.
Yeah,
I don't like this.
This talking cartoon shit is bullshit.
I don't like it.
So,
I don't like life.
Yeah, so definitely a see it for both of us, and yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. Apparently, it looks like it comes out very soon, 24th of June. That says UK. I'm on the wrong IMDb.
I had July 8th in the US of A. And
July 8th, there you go.
Yeah, I hope everybody listening, I think we're all of the same, like, 30-plus men with beard demographic. Let's just flood the theaters. Keep those kids out. Just sell at the theater with all... People with maybe, like, you can leave your kid... You get a babysitter. Keep the kids at home. Let's just make this all about us.
Well, I know we have friends who like to bring flasks in the movie theaters.
Yep.
I think we can get a couple guys with vapes to stand at the door and just blow a lot of vape smoke at the doors and get parents to turn around. If we use some salty language, maybe we'll watch a movie with sailors in it, and then we'll just come quote that as we're waiting for the movie to start. We'll try and get people to get up and walk away.
I don't know why I made this into an exclusion, like a elitist thing. I didn't mean that. Why?
Could be fun. I've never
Bring your
driven
kids,
somebody
bring
out of
everybody,
a
bring the
theater.
whole family.
I've never driven somebody out of a theater. Have you ever? Here's a question, unrelated. We're going to move on to Warcraft here. Give you our non-spoiler review of Warcraft in a minute. But I'm curious. Have you ever walked out of a movie?
No, but I almost did on this one.
On this?
Oh, what was the other one? There's two other ones where I've been very, very close. The first one is the Royal Tenenbaums. I thought it was garbage.
And you still think that?
I haven't watched it since because I thought it was so bad then. And then, was it called Dinner with Schmucks or something like that?
Steve Carell and Paul Rudd, yes.
Yeah. I hate those movies where everything is just that awkward. I didn't think that it was funny at all. I think if I would have seen, as we've talked before, the Meet the Parents movies in the theaters as well, I would have walked out of those. But to answer your question in short, no, I've never walked out of a movie.
I've only walked out of two. One of them was, I regret walking out of it because it's a very good movie. It was Blow.
Oh,
and
Gary!
I had just seen it the week before, and I took my girlfriend at the time to go see it with another friend of hers, and
she had explosive diarrhea.
No, I fell asleep.
You had
in the
explosive
theater
diarrhea.
about 40 minutes in. Yeah, I had explosive. I fell asleep in the theater about 40 minutes in, and I had just seen it the week before, and I figured, she's got a friend with her. I don't need to sit here through this shit. And I was like, I'll be in the parking lot. And I went and napped in my truck, and it was a great afternoon. I had no problem with it.
Why didn't you just stay in the theater? It's so comfortable.
Was it more comfortable sleeping? Do you like sleeping in public? I don't know. I'm not a fan of sleeping in public.
But nobody knows that you're sleeping in the theater.
I guess that's probably true.
Cross your arms and
then the other one, our good friend Mike and I, when it was in theaters, and this is topical in a sense, we just walked out because we were not entertained of Ali. We went and saw Will Smith's Ali. They obviously, when it came out, I think that movie's 12, 15 years old now.
Good God.
And it was just such a slog. It was so slow. And I want to watch it again now. We were young. Maybe I would be more in for a drama that takes its time unfolding a true story. But at the time, it was just too much of a slog.
Let's get there. Let's try and get there in our 6 degrees section.
Well, yeah, either get to watching Ali or watch the movie that I didn't walk out of, but I watched. Of 14 people in the theater, 9 of them got up and left. Was The Aristocrats. Not The Aristocats, where everybody wants to be a cat, but The Aristocrats, which is a 90-minute documentary about one filthy joke that just starts off unbelievably awful and unbearable and gets worse for 90 consecutive minutes. And yeah, there was 14 people in that theater, and 9 people got up and left.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's something to strive for, really. That kind of ratio.
Well, you're definitely not making a forgettable movie at that point. Even if people hate it that much, you're not making a forgettable movie.
True.
So anyways, let's move on to the new movie we went and saw this week, Warcraft, starring nobody you know, except for Ben Foster, is the
Your
guy.
favorite guy.
I almost think was like, I think his casting was throwing a bone to the North American audience, like, we can't make this movie with no one you've ever heard of.
Yeah.
And
so that's the best they come up with.
Travis Fimmel plays the main human character. Dominic Cooper is a guy where you go, oh yeah, I recognize that guy. I guess Paula Patton is someone that a lot of people know. Maybe Toby Kebbell as well, but Toby Kebbell's playing a CGI character, and you have no idea that it's him. So this week's movie was Warcraft, with the stunning tomato meter score of 27%. Although, I don't know if you know this, 82% from fans. The people who went to see this wanted to see it, and they were entertained by it. So, for those of you who haven't seen the movie yet, or don't know much about it, this is the story of a sort of Middle-earth-like human planet, where there's a peaceful civilization of human tribes, and they face a fearsome race of invaders called orcs, and their planet is dying, so they use magic to invade the human planet in order to take it over and repopulate for themselves. And early on we meet a main character from each side. I couldn't remember the character's name. I had to look it up here.
Doesn't matter. Nobody can pronounce it.
Yeah, none of the names in this movie you're ever going to know. you just go, oh yeah, okay, this guy's good, I think, and this guy's not. So Lothar is the leader of the humans. You get introduced to him. That's your main connection there. And then Duratan is the main orc character that we get introduced to. And Paula Patton's kind of sprinkled in for fun and strap in for the ride. There is no more to say than that. That is the non-spoiler synopsis, and we're not going to give away anything from this movie. And there really is nothing to give away from this movie, because we're going to pit, they seem to have decided we're going to pit this team against this team. We're going to find out who wins and sit and enjoy. So I'm curious, with that as the road that was laid out in front of you, and knowing going into that's all it was, what did you think of this movie?
Well, I knew that was going to be like the foundation of the movie, but I was kind of hopeful that it was going to start to branch out into something a little bit more expansive. Where did I just say expand into something more expansive?
You did, and it worked.
No, that's awful.
On 18-wheeler, nobody knows.
All right, I'll edit back. No, I won't. There's no way.
No, that's not happening.
I thought it was going to get bigger. Like, the World of Warcraft, no pun intended, is big. It's massive. There's tons of stories to be told here, and I was really just sort of disappointed with how one-dimensional this whole thing was. And even with that said, it's it gets in its own way with everybody backstab. There's a lot of backstabbing happening. I feel like I'm starting to like tread onto spoiler territory here, but there are two sides to this story, and it seems like everybody wants to kind of like help themselves but help the other side as well. And so the movie, I feel like, gets in its own way throughout the entire time, and there is so much talking. They have to explain everything, what the next move is going to be, why they just did the last move. Even at the very end, no spoilers here, we both kind of chuckled at each other where, like, the big battle that everybody knows is going to happen is going on. Everything is, like, the world is going to shit. And then two characters just stop, and they just sit and have, like, another 5-minute conversation. Like, my biggest problem with this movie is just the amount of dialogue instead of letting the action sort of speak for itself, or letting the characters' actions speak for themselves. There's so much wrong. That's probably my biggest problem with it.
Well, and I think the word to describe what you're talking about is muddled, right? The movie is a bit unclear on the path it wants to take to a sort of predictable conclusion. I think that people going to see this movie have signed up for it. I think that's indicated in that 82% fan score that this is what they came for, right? They knew they're coming to see sort of a simple story that's less about character development and more about seeing this world that they may love if they're game fans come to life, right? And we're going to get some CGI battles. We're going to get some swords and sandals type hand-to-hand combat, sword fighting and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We've got giant wolves. We've got warlocks and magicians. We've got these orc beasts doing kind of like the Hulk in the Avengers, causing a lot of damage with every swing of their hammer and every punch that they throw. And I think a lot of people are okay with that. They don't need this movie to be any more than it is. And I think that's a problem a lot of people have with sort of what we do sometimes, which is think about a movie critically, because we think about all movies critically, and yet we can't hold everything to the same standard, right?
Right.
I'm sitting here in front of a copy of one of my favorite movies of all time, Gangs of New York, which is all characters. It's 3 hours of getting to know people to the point where they feel lived in and real, and you feel invested in everything that happens to them, big and small. You feel their pain if someone hurts their feelings, and conversationally,
right,
you're with them, right? Whereas with characters in a movie like this, you're constantly at arm's length. They're at a distance. You're watching a magical world. I said to you when we stepped out of the theater that the word I used before we got into the theater was dreaded. I was dreading seeing this movie. I was convinced it was going to be a pile of garbage and that there was going to be nothing redeeming about it. And I found myself, maybe I helped myself by setting the bar that low, I found myself really enjoying the first act, really enjoying the first few scenes. And I think what happened mentally early on was sort of me allowing this movie to be what it needs to be. I thought I was watching one of the preset scenes from a movie one of the built-in scenes at the beginning of a console video game. I don't game that much, but I think of a movie or a game like GTA 5, where you have to sit through these video snippets to keep the story moving forward, and this just seemed like a large collection of all of those without the gameplay in between.
Yeah, it seemed like even that could have been done better. So I like how you kind of broke down, because I've been just kind of crapping all over this thing right from the beginning. The movie gets muddled definitely in the second act, but I was very encouraged by the setup, because originally I thought that the visuals looked pretty good. I liked the whole orcs coming over into the human world, and I thought the lead kind of villain on the orc side was actually pretty good. He's kind of
It's it's visually interesting, right? I said to
yeah.
some friends today that the CGI beams of light budget was off the hook in this movie. They spent so much money on beams of light. It's ridiculous. And for a large group of fans, that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, so the other part too is okay, so first act pretty good, second act gets completely in the way, and then the third act very predictable. A lot of the outcomes, and that's one of the other problems I have with this, is a lot of the outcomes I was just kind of like waiting to happen. It's one thing for something to be predictable and then they happen right away, like, oh, I just realized that was going to happen. But like the whole ending is kind of like spilled out, and like how the characters were going to end their journey in this movie was laid out about maybe a half an hour, 40 minutes into it, and you're just kind of like, when is everybody going to catch up to me? And that's a problem, like whether or not you're looking at a movie critically or not. If the audience is an hour ahead of the characters, then that's a movie problem. It's fundamental. It's just not good movie making. So that was part of it for me. The other part is casting, as you mentioned, with Ben Foster being kind of like throwing a bone, like we got to recognize somebody. That's just one example of pretty much all of the casting here being horrible. I didn't think there was a single cast member where I was like, this guy was born or even remotely close to being like made for this role in this movie.
So I would have one exception to that. And when I look at so the 82%, like I say, I think makes sense to me in a certain way because I can picture the viewer for whom this movie did what it was supposed to do.
82% for sweet giant wolves.
But to think about the 27% from critics, the first thing I would list when thinking critically about this movie is casting. And I think you're right. I think at every turn, you kind of think, they could have done a much better job with just this one character. Ben Foster's character, the way they describe him, one would think you would have an actor 20 years his senior playing that role, right? With this sort of CGI realism, getting a live actor to play the orc characters, right? You thought maybe we should have got someone recognizable, or even seen Toby Kebbell, the actor who plays Duratan, in the orc's face, but it almost seems like he's just there to provide the voice and the dialogue. Yeah. The one exception to the bad casting, and Paula Patton I almost can't even speak about. I have no idea the character's purpose in the story. I don't know if she comes from the game, and the relevance of this character is supposed to carry more weight than it does. There's no explanation for her heritage, which she describes halfway through the movie, and I don't know what she's doing here. But this Travis Fimmel, who I know nothing about and I've never seen before, I did like as the leader of the human race, and I got a very distinct Heath Ledger vibe from him. I thought he was really engaging. I thought he was the one character who had some acting to do at certain points, and unfortunately it was too few and far between those scenes. But I really liked what he did here.
I mean, I don't see it. The best I could say is it's fine. Like, and it's probably the highlight of a whole pile of shit. But still, like, if you would have put that in anything else, like, just trying to think of it like on a level playing field with any other movie, like that isn't a standout role at all. It's just because he was better than everybody else in this movie. With regards to the games, like, I didn't play the World of Warcraft, which is the one where like really things, like, probably the reason this movie exists is where hundreds of millions of people are paying $15-20 a month to be a part of this online. Everybody's spending people losing their jobs or failing school and going into crazy debt. Divorces are happening because
and why it can make over $160 million in China when it opened 2 weeks ago, like.
Right. So I didn't play that game, but I played like the strategy games before that, and there's a lot more and even though I didn't play the World of Warcraft games, I know that there are more types of characters. There is a world there, kind of like the Lord of the Rings. It's hard not to bring up Lord of the Rings when you're talking about orcs and humans. It's very much.
For sure.
The reviewer on We the Nerdy kind of brought that up as well. I thought it was a good point. So done better, that story done better by the Lord of the Rings, but it deserves to be done better in a Warcraft movie because truly, like, the lore is there, and there are, like, different types of mysterious characters versus kind of like your more powerful grunt characters and big monsters. Like, I feel like they just missed out on a huge portion of the lore to bring forward into a movie. And even though what we got was something more simple than what I'm suggesting, it still managed to find a way to bumble the entire way along. There's half-breeds that happen. There are babies that we don't know what their whole thing is. It looks like, this isn't a spoiler again, it looks like this is being led to set up for a sequel. So maybe they can learn something.
I think they clearly want to start a franchise. I think that's evident almost even before you see the movie, that this is almost like a test balloon. We want to see if we can build a market in which we can go on and expand this world, right?
The sequel's going to be all Chinese actors. They're going to move the whole production overseas and just kind of cater specifically to the Chinese and the Korean markets.
There's a good chance that the market over there that is now dominating the box office is going to have more and more influence in a lot of these tentpole movies now, because even on some of the Marvel movies now, their box office is starting to come close to equaling the North American box office. I know it happened with the most recent Bond. The same thing, the European and Asian markets were huge for that movie. And I think the whole idea of tentpoles is going to shift to a certain point where we're going to stop seeing sort of American-made heroes and start seeing more emphasis on worlds that are less identifiable as a wholesome American story.
Right.
We go back to what we said about the Deepwater Horizon preview. That's when they're trying to tug on the heartstrings and talk about these guys being heroes. They're going to set it up as this is the all-American, lunch pail and hard hat man of the people, and I think that type of lead character is going to start dying. And whether it's in a fantasy story like this where it has nothing to do with North America or having a white American lead actor, I think in all movies you're going to start seeing more ensemble casts, more stories about less than one shining knight in armor.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
You're going to see more movies like this that are sort of, I don't want to say something for everybody because I think this is clearly geared towards a young male audience. But I think something geared towards a massive worldwide audience where you don't need a base of knowledge like this movie. You just need to sign on to have some mindless fun. And I think that's a long, super rambly, incoherent way of saying I think we're going to see simpler and dumber movies, which is one of our main criticisms that we haven't brought up, that this movie doesn't give its audience any credit. It slaps you in the face with its plot on every turn. It thinks you're stupid, and it's kind of a dumb movie. And that's what the 27 is all about.
I couldn't have said it any better myself.
Then that rambling mess?
No, just that last part. That it's stupid, and it thinks you're stupid too. So it's just a bunch of people speaking stupid to each, and now I sound stupid saying it.
Yeah, there you go.
Would you ever watch this movie again? Would you ever
No.
watch this again? Like,
No.
do you feel like maybe you like missed something? Like we saw it late.
Why?
Like, is there any like? I'm just like, because sometimes it causes me a little distress when I see other people talking that they are saying that they really, really like this movie. When I see a Rotten Tomatoes score from the critics above 80. And people are just loving it. I'm like, I just don't even get it. Does you ever like, or are you often off like the mark when it comes to the fan scores, or are you more on the critic score? Like,
I wouldn't have been able to guess the fan score here. I would have predicted the 27% from critics. There's nothing critically to hold on to here. It's not visually stunning, even though there's a ton of CGI and it's visually satisfying for the people who like this world. It would be the equivalent of a Street Fighter fan getting to see Ryu throw a fireball, right? we didn't get good CGI from the game that we know or we love. But maybe there's a group of people for whom these warlocks and magicians doing these spells and working their magic with all this CGI beams of light that I was talking about, that's amazing to them. And I don't begrudge people liking stupid movies. Up until that last week, I thought I really liked Romeo Must Die, right? And I think of a movie like Too Fast, Too Furious, which I don't even want to look at the score on. It's widely considered one of the worst, if not the worst, Fast and Furious movies. I know it's dumb, but I enjoy that particular brand of dumb. So I'm not shocked at the 82. It's a little higher than I would have expected from fans, but I would have thought the people who are going to go so far as to rate a movie on the internet and write a review are the people who are opening week viewers. They're big fans, right?
Yeah, and it's a response to the critic score.
That too. It could be a backlash to the backlash to a certain extent.
Ugh, God, we spent real money on this and spent real time. If you guys at all align with what Gary and I think about movies, just get the hell away from this movie. Especially if you don't like Warcraft. If you never even played the games, like, you have absolutely zero reason to watch this movie. Are we scoring this?
Yeah, so what does that statement look like in number form out of 5?
This gets a 1 out of 5 for me. This was
a 1 out of 5.
Garbage. Absolute trash. Terrible movie.
And would you please give the people, along with your 1 out of 5 star rating, the movie mashup for people, if you wanted to recommend it to someone, you wanted to tell them what they're in for. What was your mashup?
This is the mashup of if The Hobbit had made love to the Mortal Kombat movie and gave birth to a premature baby.
Yeah, like a Zika baby. Like it's The Hobbit and Mortal Kombat with a little bit of downsiness and Zika in it.
And by the way, the worst parts of the Mortal Kombat movie, I kind of liked actually you know what? No, Street Fighter. So The Hobbit plus Street Fighter.
There you go. I liked it a little more than you did, which is shocking considering how much I dreaded going to this movie. Mm-hmm. I will give this a 2.5 out of 5 in the sense that you asked me if I'd ever see it again. The answer is no. It is as forgettable and down the middle of the road as a franchise this big could ever be. And you look at 82-27, somewhere in the middle, 50-60% is exactly where I think most people would end up on this. Like, you're going to find the odd person who likes it and the odd person who hates it, but everybody else is going to say, what did I just watch? Fine. Take that 2 hours of my life, and I'm just going to move on. And yeah, 2.5 out of 5 for me. 1 out of 5 is harsh, and I like that you hate this movie. It's a passionate score from you, and I appreciate it.
I always give, like, one of the reasons, like, I always, like, somehow quantify the number of stars, and I'm trying to think of
why you gave this the one you gave it.
I should almost give it, like, a half star for all the half-breeds in this movie. No, I'm gonna stick with 1. This is just bad. Just bad. It's terrible.
All right, well, that'll be our final word on Warcraft. Just bad, it's terrible. But I will say that we got to sort of wash the sour taste out of our mouth because we got to watch one of our favorite movies for this week's version of 6 Degrees, and that's The Departed, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Jack Nicholson and Matt Damon and Mark Wahlberg and Martin Sheen and
Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin's amazing.
Alec Baldwin.
And I absolutely love. I wanted to ask you. One of the things we haven't talked about too much, unless it came up sort of organically as part of the conversation, when we're doing these older movies from our collection, and for those people who don't know what our 6 Degrees of Con Air, or maybe newly retitled 6 Degrees segment is all about, is we wanted to go back and watch movies that we love, or movies that we hated, or movies that we remembered from our younger days off of our DVD collections for Netflix. Full of spoilers. We're going to ruin the endings. We're going to talk about our favorite scenes. We're going to talk about wherever the conversation takes us on some stuff that we wanted to go back and watch. And this week I had so much fun, but I wanted to ask you, do you remember the first time you saw this movie, and what did you think about it then?
Yeah, I remember watching this in the theater, and it's funny because right before we started recording this, and I think we mentioned here too, that this might be one of the best movies of all time. And I remember thinking that immediately after the movie. And you know that thing where you see a movie and you're hyped up on it and you're like, wow, that was incredible. But there's always like this time delay where you can even start to think about putting that movie in your greatest of all time list. Like, it's been has it been 10 years? Is this a 2006 movie?
It is 2006.
So I think we're at that time. I think that it is appropriate to start to, like, it's almost like entering an athlete into the Hall of Fame. There's a certain time lapse that has to occur. I think we're at that point. I feel probably even stronger now than I did after the movie. I'm assuming the reason you asked the question is because did you not like this movie immediately after seeing it in the theater?
No, the reason I asked is simply because I was thinking about, this was, for me, a movie that I remember exactly what you said about putting it immediately on a list of whether it's a top 25 or a top 50 or a Hall of Fame type movie. I remember this is one of the first movies where I thought that from the trailer, right?
Yes.
I was old enough to have a love and appreciation for Scorsese's work. I was old enough to have formed my own opinions on a lot of these actors. Baldwin in a supporting role, Nicholson in what's really a very big supporting role, because the Leo and Damon are the leads. I had really strong feelings on both those guys. I mean, Good Will Hunting is a top 3 all-time movie for me. I love Matt Damon, and he was on a run after all the Bourne movies and all the Oceans movies. He was one of the biggest stars in the world when this came out already before this performance. Mm-hmm. And then Leo, this was near the end of his amazing run with Gangs and Blood Diamond and Catch Me If You Can. And I think The Aviator had come out, and he was just... We had 2 actors at their absolute peak with maybe the greatest director ever, supported by Nicholson and Baldwin and Ray Winstone and Martin Sheen, and just... You knew from the packaging of this movie, the way they put the teaser trailer out, I remember, with the Rolling Stones song, that we're about to watch something of substance, right? Like, this is going to be up on that echelon if they don't fuck it up. And like you, I remember coming out of it not with a sort of a fist pumping, like, oh my god, that was amazing kind of love for it, but just a more sincere, like, that movie was genuinely great thought coming out of it.
Yeah.
And that's what made me think to ask the question.
Well, and I came out of it watching just this week thinking the exact same thing, and just in pure, like, I just am so appreciative that they pulled this off. There are so many ways that this could have gone wrong. The script could have gone wrong. One of the actors maybe just mail it in because he is who he is, or, you know, they've all reached a certain kind of elite status in their acting career. Any one of these guys could have just mailed it in, as I said. But even the connection in this, Anthony Anderson from last week's movie, I thought did an amazing job.
Yeah, absolutely solid performance.
So we talk about casting in Warcraft, and the difference in this movie is everybody is perfectly cast. The whole universe is well realized. I love this movie from the opening frame until the final credits, even with the cheesy little rat crawling across at the very end. But I actually, before we go on to just say how amazing this movie is, if there is one knock, Leo and Matt Damon, they could have looked maybe a little different. They're kind of similar. I don't know if that's done on purpose. There's a lot of maybe confusing things that could have been cleared up with, in terms of how those two are. They kind of have like the same haircut. A lot of Costellos, Costigans, and all these different names are very, very similar as well. And I remember being confused the first time I saw it. And it's just not necessary. It's not like these are based on real people. I feel like some of the names and some of the way things are shown could have been a little better differentiated. But aside from that, this is just like you're almost rooting for every character. You're rooting for Jack Nicholson, who seems like he exists in this movie purely to deliver one-liners. Like, God, I'm now blanking on the guy's name. Famous one-liner comedian from Caddyshack. Good God, help me out here.
Chevy Chase?
No,
Bill Murray?
Oh, Jesus. No, the old guy.
Rodney Dangerfield.
Thank you. He's the Rodney Dangerfield of this movie. He's just saying clever things left, right, and center. Just, what else can we say? This movie is perfect. Do you want to do a run-through?
Well, yeah, I've got a lot to talk about. I made an absolute, laundry list. I've never taken this many notes of things that I thought were worth mentioning.
I love it. Let's relive it.
Now, I just want, so people don't think we're just going to spend the next 20 minutes licking this movie's balls. I do not think this movie is perfect. And I'm looking at scores of 91 and 94, and I agree that it's great, and I liked it then. But I thought there's something keeping it from getting up to that Shawshank level of sort of flawless. And I never put my finger on it. And I've watched it a few times the last few years. I had this thought a couple years back when we didn't have a podcast to talk about it on, and I definitely had it again last night. I do not think that Nicholson's performance is up to the level of everybody else. I think he takes it so far into madness, which I think was coaxed out of him. You can tell by some of the scenes that Scorsese included, like the Coke scene nearing to the end, right? The opera scene with the color changes, the interrogation scene right near the end when he's asking Leo if he's the rat, where he's drawing and burning his drawing and killing flies and eating the fly and then leaving the table and then coming back and shushing Mr. French behind him like he's playing a game. Like he's unraveling into madness and he's getting a little loose around the edges, afraid around the edges, and I understand it was on purpose, but I felt it got a little out of the realm of reality. These characters felt so real and felt so honest for so long that I did not love the way that it all came apart at the end. So we'll sort of flip the format before we go into specific scenes of movies or parts of the movie that I want to talk about or that you want to talk about. You said perfect. Does that mean 5 out of 5 for you? Actually, you love this movie that much?
Did I say that I don't think it's perfect, but this is a 5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah?
For sure.
So this is one of those movies where I'm going to say 4.5 out of 5 because there's something keeping it from that elite level. I think it's Nicholson's performance in this, but it might be a direction thing. But let's go through it. So, I mean, we've already been talking about the ending, and we're assuming everybody who's listening to this has seen this movie. But if you haven't, definitely something to go and check out. But if you haven't been convinced by what we're talking about with all these amazing performances, just a detective story where everybody's double-crossing everybody else, directed by Martin Scorsese, is something you should be in for if you're not. So the first thing I noticed was right off the top how Nicholson's narration, even at the beginning when his face is in the dark because he's supposed to be younger, is so harsh and is immediately supposed to draw some feelings out of you. He drops N-bombs and black chappies and like mild pedophilia with the shopkeeper's daughter in the first 3 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that was... I know it was intentional to make you understand that this guy's supposed to be charismatic and he's Jack Nicholson, he's a star and you like him, but you are not going to like this character. Did you feel that right off the beginning like I did?
I felt it as being, I would say, maybe a little jarring, but then I also kind of like quickly snapped back to go like, 2016 kind of sucks. We can't say anything. We can't do anything without feeling like, am I supposed to be offended by this? Like I sort of allowed myself to like acknowledge the fact that this was sort of like, you don't see this anymore. A lot of the N-bombs, you don't see the F word, but not in the 4-letter one version. A lot of these different words that you're just not allowed to say are words. And yeah, like you said, the pedophilia is just not around anymore. So this is kind of like the first time now, 10 years out, 10 years removed from The Departed, we're starting to see a movie in the mid-2000s as like being a product of its time. Where I don't think we would have realized that even 3-4 years ago. We're now in a different, we're just in a different like social setting now where we have a different vernacular. We're not allowed to say certain things so like back in the 90s, everything was extreme, everything was cool, but now you look at it, it's like, man, that was really lame. I think in the 2000s, there was a certain vocabulary and a certain way of talking that now, 10 years removed, we don't talk like that. And I think
I think I know what you mean in the sense that you're not advocating for more people to say fag or retard or any of those horrible words that nobody's allowed to say anymore, but what you mean is that it almost seems like unless you're Martin Scorsese and you're impervious to criticism or you just don't care, criticize me and see what happens, you can't even use that language and those types of things to establish that this character is someone you shouldn't like, or this is a terrible person, or you should be judging this character, or this is a time when people said these things, and isn't that bad, or aren't we better off now? As long as you're using it to say something. I think a lot of people hate that type of language when it's used in a casual manner, when it doesn't seem necessary. You put that type of stuff in an Expendables movie, There's
Right.
nothing. We're not learning anything deeper about these characters. That's not the type of movie we're watching. But if you're going to use it judiciously, if you trust the artist, the auteur, if you will, the director, who's the writer who's putting these words out there for a purpose to make you feel something, I don't like this movie because they do that. I just think I think the willingness or the bravery, if you want to call it that, to use that type of language and to make someone so hateable by putting them out there right at the beginning is like, you're watching a bigot, right?
Yeah.
You're watching an asshole. This guy is going to charm you. Like you said, you root for everybody at certain points in the movie. This guy's going to charm you. He's going to seduce you. He's got all the charisma in the world. But from minute one, he's almost daring you to forgive him for starting off being such a pile of shit.
Well, and I don't want to derail this too much, but I felt like as I was watching the movie, some of the violence in it was actually more, I think, impactful for me. Like when I saw some of these headshots in it, those are the moments that I went like, wow, we don't even see that type of stuff anymore, where you really got surprised that gun is 6 inches away from that guy's head and those are his brains going on the wall. And I think that is funny. It's funny that we end up starting talking about the language that Jack Nicholson is using versus like the imagery that we see, which is, to me, way more jarring, way more. It just makes you kind of stop and think. Yet it's 2016, and here we are talking about like the words that somebody's using. And I also want to be clear. I feel like I'm not saying that everybody should just go out and use this word. I hope that's really clear.
And it did not come across that way.
It shouldn't be. And any part of a movie shouldn't trigger like this automatic response where we feel like we've been conditioned by social media to respond in a certain way to certain things.
I also don't want anybody to hear that opening sequence and crinkle their nose and say, "Oh no, this movie's not for me."
Right.
You're about to watch an amazing story.
Yes.
And it's funny because the thing that I thought of when you were talking about the violence and the language and the characters, this movie is so slick and so charming in places. I don't think you'd ever describe it as gritty, but that's what it is.
It's totally great. It's Boston.
Yeah, there's dark, grisly violence, the language, some of the just personal ugliness. It's almost innate. Yeah. There's a lot of shots of people shooting looks to each other or reacting to a conversation they're having. There's a lot of people on screen, and this is one of the things I love about Scorsese. A lot of people aren't on screen who aren't speaking. And it feels intimate. You feel part of the movie, and it's definitely got a lot of depth. And gritty is one of the words I'd use. So you go from that scene introducing him to the Stades montage introducing Damon and Leo.
Yep.
You get the cops versus firemen rugby game, and go save a kitten in a tree, you fucking homos. Yeah. Like you get a laugh line, and you get introduced to Damon in a way where you've already been told that he's gonna be the double agent, that he's working for the criminal side of this, but they're not giving you what they gave you with Nicholson. They're trying to make you like him. That line is supposed to make you think that this guy is one of the boys. He plays with his team. He's one of the guys. He wants to have a beer. He wants to talk shit, right? Like,
and he's got a lot going for him too. Like, it's so funny to me, the dichotomy here. There's just so much going on. I can't believe it all kind of works. It all fits into place. With Leo, who wants to do good. He's a good kid, right? Like, brought up in kind of a shitty upbringing. His whole family is a disaster, but he wants to be like the shining star. And then to do that, he has to go through hell. He's the one who gets put into prison, and he's the one who has his arm broken in the first scene, and all these terrible things are happening to him. Meanwhile, Matt Damon is on the other side. He's a piece of shit, but he has all these great things. He's meeting girls. He's charming. He gives everybody that wink, and he's got all the money in the world. He's moving into this great apartment, and I just love. I didn't pick up on that until this time watching it. We're like, man, Leo's getting the shaft here, and Matt Damon's just like kicking back. Life is good. He's kind of like with every other drug movie that I think a lot of kids grow up thinking like, man, I could really be like Scarface, except they don't watch the end. They just they watch like the beginning part where everything is going great. So that's Matt Damon in this beginning part. Everything is going great.
Yeah, everything's coming up Milhouse for like the first 2 hours. Yeah, absolutely. So like I like that scene and the way it establishes him, and the montage establishes Leo as kind of his straight-laced opposite, right? You've got this guy who's taking the shortcut road through the criminal world, right? He's got the backing of Nicholson, and you've got Leo, who, like you say, is a little grittier. You don't find out this till later, but he's sort of the man of the people, right? He's got his sort of shitty goatee-ish facial hair and stuff like that. He's the less square-jawed, Adonis-like version of Matt Damon, and you get that, and then they both go to Captain Queen and Dignam's office and to meet Martin Sheen and Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg is absolutely on fire from minute one.
Mm-hmm.
Lace curtain motherfucker, and what's the matter? You don't remember any Shakespeare? Like, he's comic relief in a movie that isn't a comedy, and his character somehow comes off as believable. That he's this hostile, and this is how he chooses to get through his days in this dark and seedy underworld or whatever it is. Like, so how is it that character doesn't come off feeling fake?
It's because
I don't even understand.
It's because he gets the job done. Like, again, I love watching these movies over and over again. I learn something new each and every time. It wasn't until this time where I picked up on this is his way of, like, sifting through the applicants. Like, is this guy for real? Does he really want this? Like, what an easy way to just get under somebody's skin. Just, like, take all the easy shots at him, try to see if he leaves, try to get him under pressure, see if he cracks.
Yeah, it's like I guess it's like the antagonist on a sports team, right? You got that hockey player, that Theo Fleury player on your team, right, who you hate. Everybody hates him except for the people who play alongside of him, because you know what he's doing, and he's doing it on your side of the bat.
And Martin Sheen's right there saying, like, you got to excuse him. He's got his own style or whatever he says. And,
yeah.
Like, he understands, and that's the line that I picked up on this time, where I'm like, oh, that's why he's the way he is, and that's why. And it's more than just, it's deeper than he's hilarious. I can't believe he's saying these things to him, and how is he ever going to react to this? That scene is one of the best. Exactly. It's taken to, like, the extreme, or, like, it gets verbally abusive rather than physically abusive part of the good cop, bad cop part of it.
Well, and what I liked is, so you're 19 minutes into the movie.
You did take good notes.
When Dropkick Murphys kicks in. Yeah, so this movie was available to us in every format. I have DVD and Blu-ray. I think I have 2 copies. It's on Netflix right now. It's on my Telus On Demand. So that's how I demanded it. That's how I watched it. I said, I demand to watch this movie right this minute. And when that happened, I was like, not many movies do this. This feels like what a TV drama would do, where you have the scene before the first commercial, and then the credits come on before the rest of the episode starts, right? Most movies roll their X-Men style. You got your shitty credits, and then you start the movie. We're 19 minutes in before Dropkick Murphys kicks in, and you are cranked and ready to go.
Yes.
You know where every piece is on the board? They have established all the characters, right? So in the same way that Warcraft swept the board clear of everything that you may or may not know about that series and said, people are going to be too confused by this world. Here, humans, orcs, a portal between them, one story for 2 people, and that's it, right? We've introduced like 6 characters, all played by amazing actors. We've laid out complex storylines for the majority of them, right? You have a feeling about them, but you haven't made a final decision because you don't know where this movie's going if it's the first time you've seen it. And I feel like even the soundtrack selection was genius, with just besides the fact that it's set in Boston, to do all that preparation and then wind you up to set you off on this movie that gets pretty manic. For a movie that's this long and this deep, gets crazy and fast-paced in certain points. Was just brilliant filmmaking.
I'm so glad that you even brought this up, because sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy where I notice something like, even when the title of the movie hits and it's that slam and then the music kicks in, you're like, man, I am pumped. I was like ready to go. I just love that moment. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And with is that 19 minutes in?
19 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's a very odd structure. Like, there are movies now where they don't even do it. Christopher Nolan really likes doing this with all of his movies, where there is no title. He starts a story, and you don't realize till the end of the movie, when it says The Dark Knight, that you never saw a title screen.
Right.
That they didn't go through the cast in the bottom corner and stuff like that. They never did that, right? And this was an even weirder choice to jam it in the middle, because you're into the story at this point, and then he's almost restarting it. Like, that was a prologue, guys. The book hasn't started. That was what you needed to know for me to take you on the journey I'm about to take you on. And if you're at that point not thinking, yeah, you got me, like, I trust you in terms of a storyteller, something's wrong with you. Because if you've got a problem with The Departed, like I say, I think it's great while ultimately imperfect. It's not with that first 19 minutes, that's for sure.
Yeah, man. So where do we go from here? Do you want to go from like just a run of show here? Because I could just like gloat about this movie the whole time. This is just every single person in this movie is incredible.
So just so I'll take you through the other things I made notes on. Just get your opinion on a couple of these things, because we can't run this episode up to 2 hours, and we could go through this movie scene by scene. But one of the things I really liked is, and you see it in the next sequence after the beginning, when they start setting up SIU and the investigations unit and stuff like that, and Alec Baldwin and Mark Wahlberg have their banter together, and Baldwin is telling Matt Damon and the rest of the table about investigating Nicholson's character, right? Mm-hmm. Characters laughing at other characters. This is something that makes the movie feel real, and I don't think a lot of people even notice that they're seeing this, but it's what separates comedy in a great story that is not a comedy from sitcoms. It's what makes The New Girl or Brooklyn Nine-Nine an outright comedy versus a movie like this that you would describe as funny even though it's not a comedy.
Right.
Is because in sitcoms, people tell jokes and you need a straight man, and they're just delivering setups and punchlines. In this, when Alec Baldwin asks Mark Wahlberg, how's your mother? Good, she's tired from fucking my father. The people at the table are giggling because this is funny. You're human beings. You would laugh if someone said that in front of you. Alec Baldwin makes his crew laugh, right? And I think it's just one of the things early on I noticed that makes me feel like I'm watching a real story.
Yeah. How did you feel about Alec Baldwin in the role? Like, I didn't really pick up on too much about his character before until I watched it this time around, where he really is like he's pretty much just a straight-laced guy, but he's probably the most charismatic straight-laced character that I've ever seen, where he's a by-the-books kind of leader. He's a paper pusher, but I loved how he totally misjudges Matt Damon in this movie. Like, he's completely blinded by his perfect record, his great attendance, and just his overall demeanor. Like, he has absolutely no idea who Matt Damon is, and the way that he, like, you can tell it doesn't look like he's acting through this. Like, he is playing a character who's just giving this guy all the freedom in the world to just, like, lead this investigation. And I never doubted for a second that Alec Baldwin as a person, like, maybe even believed that this wasn't the right move.
Yeah, when I think about him, and maybe not this isn't backstory on the character, but it's the development of the character, is that he is all surface. He's all about that bluster, that banter. He's all about, we're going to catch the bad guys, but he's a representation of the city and the style and the department, and he's all about surface, right? And you've got to act tough, and all that matters are the stats. And you see that later on in the movie, right? So when he asks Matt Damon about the first murder, I think Kennefic's murder, or no, the two guys from Providence murder, and he says, Jimmy Pappas did it, and we found the gun and it's over, and Alec Baldwin says, Key Bono, who benefits, right? And Damon says, Key gives a shit. It's got a bow on it, right? And he's like, yep, that's the right answer. That's all I care about. Get your job done, right? Even later in the movie, at the driving range scene, where he says, how's your marriage coming?
Yep.
It's all about surface, right? And he says it outright. Being married is important. Lets people know you're not a homo. Lets people know that at least one person can tolerate you.
And your dick works.
Yeah, your dick works, and you got a little bit of money in your pocket, right? Like, he's all about presentation and surface. And that's all he is a very shallow character, right? Wears his emotions on his sleeve. When he gets in the fight at the Sting later, he's still that same sort of wound up Boston kid from the neighborhood who just got into this job and thinks, I'm just here to arrest people, and if you get in my way, You're a fucking idiot. I don't care. You know what I mean? Everything about that character is on the outside.
Yeah.
And I think you can do that when there's so much internalization going on in the rest of this movie. There's so many shots of Damon's face, especially early in the movie, where you know he's a double agent and no one else in the room does. So they're talking about finding the rat. They're talking about Costello and how powerful he is. And a lot of times when other people are speaking, again, not focusing on the person who's speaking, they put the camera on Damon, and only you know that he's a double agent in that room, and it feels like you have access. And it just it keeps you engaged in the story in a way I really like.
What did you think about the relationship? There's sort of like love triangle in here. Sometimes this is a part of a movie that can be kind of just terrible. It's really hard, I feel, to pull off like a decent love triangle. And this is all I feel like the Leo, Matt Damon, and Madeline, the Vera. I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Vera Farmiga.
Farmiga, who was great in this movie, I thought.
Yes.
This is all sort of compelled and driven forward by the fact that she is a counselor, she's a therapist, she's sort of like psychoanalyzing the two, and she's looking at Leo, who is ultimately like a broken character, versus Matt Damon, who's a lot rougher, he's a lot tougher, and she's sort of, it seems like she's more attracted to Leo because she can fix him, but ultimately like, she was kind of wowed by, again, the appearance of Matt Damon in the way that he presents himself.
I think you say it perfectly, and I think it's another example of an assumption you may make that gets paid off later in the movie, right? So the reason Baldwin trusts Damon so much and they relate so much is because they're the same. They're all about their outward appearance, what they're presenting to the world, and they're all about the surface. And what she likes about Leo is that she's getting access to the inside. She's seeing a real person. It almost seems like you get the sense that she knows at a certain point it turns, and she knows that she's never getting in with Damon. He's always going to keep her at arm's length, and he is all surface. And then it pays off later in the movie, right before they hook up, when Farmiga and Leo are in her apartment together, right? And she says, I got to say, your vulnerability right now is really freaking me out. And that's the part that compels her. And you're right, a lot of times the relationship dynamics, the romantic elements of these movies, when that's not the central story, it's not even really the B story or the C story, it can feel jammed in for accessibility's reasons to try and bring in another segment of the viewership. But this, again, to me, felt organic and real, and I believed her connection with Matt Damon, and I believed her connection with Leo, and I believed how conflicted she would be about that. And
whose baby is it?
I'm convinced this is like Inception spinning the top, and it keeps doing it. This is one of those things you could talk about forever. I'm convinced it's Leo's baby. He's clearly super fertile.
Yep.
Right? Like, there's no way that the OxyContin and drinking and, like, any of that stuff has ever done any damage. Matt Damon, impotent character, can't get anything done. Maybe impotent for real in the literal sense. Yeah, definitely Leo's baby. Definitely Leo's baby.
I want to stress that I don't think that impotent and sterile are the same thing. So, like, maybe he's sterile. Like, it probably gets
I just showed my
job done.
Yeah.
That's okay. I've been mincing terms the whole time.
No, it's the difference between thesaurus knowledge and dictionary knowledge.
Oh,
I know lots of words,
knowledge.
even if I don't know what the fuck they mean.
Totally. Well, yeah, that's pretty great. Okay, so things.
So wait, hold on a second. You answer that. Whose baby?
Oh,
is
it's
it?
definitely Leo's. And I have the
It's
exact
Leo's
same
baby.
logic
Fine.
as you. Like, clearly, Matt Damon is shooting blanks here.
Yes.
Okay. Tons of deception going on here. One of the things that you know about me, and I think people who listen to this podcast for a little while know, that I don't really like lying in movies. I don't like when people are deceptive to each other, because more often than not, they're doing it in a way that it doesn't make any sense. It's not, like, realistic. It's usually in a way that, like, only on the surface covers up their lie, and then it's a lie built on top of a lie, and you're like, when is this whole Jenga tower going to fall over? This one seemed to me like every time Matt Damon did something, it wasn't putting himself, like, any time that he was lying to the rest of his team or coming up with a cover-up, it wasn't putting himself at risk. It always seemed like he was doing it in a really smart way, even near the end. Even near the end where, like, things are getting really close for him. He even gets chased down by Leo. He still manages to keep a pretty, like, straight mind on how he's going to stay on top of all this stuff. And I really like that about this. It didn't seem like they were just making it up as they went along. Like, it seemed like every decision made sense and pushed the story forward. So I also just want to commend the movie on that it overcame what is often a downer for me, which is whenever lies are built on top of lies and all the deception that happens. Martin Scorsese manages to make not only Matt Damon's character make sense throughout the whole thing, but also Leo, who's basically doing the two double agent thing. I just can't believe that it works.
Well, yeah, and it's all about writing. It's all about maintaining a minimum level of plausibility.
Sure.
Right? And that's, you're right. I never thought of that, but every yarn that Damon spins has a minimum amount of credibility to it. Even at the end, when he's caught and he's got a gun to his head from Leo on the roof, he's trying to sell that he was running Costello and Costello was his rat.
Yes.
And it's like, you're talking to the guy who's been with the guy with Nicholson for 2 years or whatever it's been.
Yep. Like,
this is the one guy you're never going to get this lie past, but he's trying to sell it, and you're right. He's committed to it, and it's plausible, and it's not. It doesn't require a leap from the viewer.
Well, and it all like culminates into like this crazy third act. I feel. I mean, whether or not you think that the ending is great or not, but even chasing down Martin Sheen and like telling his team, go investigate this guy. Yep. He might be part of this whole thing. They've done all the groundwork to make that make sense. And yes. Then for Leonardo DiCaprio's character to almost get caught because the guy gives him the wrong address. He gives him 314 instead of 344 Wash, which I also love because if you're not in Boston or if you're not like, you don't realize like what the hell is 314 Wash. Like, that's how they talk. Like, I just love the shorthand kind of, the vernacular that they use, the dialects that they use there.
Well, and this gives me an opportunity real quick to stop and ask about your feelings on Scorsese as a
I thought
film.
you were going to stop and just read a live read on audible.com.
On audible.com.
Speaking of that.
Movieprint.com, yeah. I would love it. But no, Scorsese is a director, right? So him putting those elements in and the visual stuff, like you were saying, how it gets a little messy in the end. I think this is where you kind of come in with your preconceived feelings about a director, because I wonder if it was anybody but Scorsese, would we think that they were losing control of their movie and it would be a detriment to them? Because I think of this as a huge compliment to Scorsese, where he starts chopping up the directing of the movie, the visuals of the movie, in a way that mirrors the way this story is all unraveling. Mm-hmm. Leo is losing a grip on his lie. Damon's losing a grip on his lie. Nicholson's losing his grip on the whole story, on the whole world, right? And I noted down here when he shortcuts a lot of the audio, skips to another scene, ends the song abruptly, right? Some of the weird screen wipes, right? The Coke scene, which is out of nowhere, doesn't fit in with the rest of the movie. The time jump with when Vera Farmiga moves in with Damon, and then she's moving out of her apartment when she sleeps with Leo, but you didn't know that when she moved in with Damon, but now you know. The dildo scene, which like makes no sense at all. Nicholson's interrogation scene, like I said,
in the movie theater.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Why he brings out at the men's theater? Yeah. Why is suddenly Nicholson is Carrot Top? Like, he's, I'm bringing a prop dildo because I have to go meet my rat because I didn't realize down.
It was a dildo.
Oh, you thought that was Nicholson's
that was his
bright white
like
11-inch bean?
I thought in the movie that was his.
No, it's a prank, right? Like, now all of a sudden he's going for guffaws, for knee slappers, right? When he's supposed to be worried that this is all coming undone.
Well, he owns the place.
Yeah, like I think it's even Matt Damon says, like, when you take this shit seriously at that point, like, he's coming undone. And then again, his interrogation of Leo with the eating of the fly and the lighting of the map and the impersonating a rat with his teeth and stuff, like, it's getting wild. The movie's getting wild, and I credit Scorsese for that because I think it's supposed to be metaphorical for what's going on with these characters, that everything's coming a little bit frayed at the edges.
I can't decide if I want to say that that's reading too much into it or if that's insanely insightful. So I will just leave it at at that comment. You're probably right. It's probably purposeful. It is probably like a metaphor. Ultimately, for me, it all made sense because none of these people really deserve to win in the end, anyways. Maybe if anything, Leo, but ultimately everybody gets shot in the head, which is kind of like a classic. I don't know, Reservoir Dogs, or I don't know. There's a certain type of movie where just everybody dies and there really wasn't any way out of it. Even Matt Damon ultimately gets one of the greatest death scenes or most memorable death scenes, where he just kind of like looks at the guy, looks at Marky Mark, who's dressed up in the whole like
feel it.
He's got his scrubs and his what has he got on his feet? He's like wrapped
booties.
up. He's got little booties. That's right. He's got little booties, and he just kind of gives him like okay, and then he gives like Marky Mark kind of waits just a little more. Like there's that extra little pause to just make it that much more unbearable. Like he's gonna die. Just shoot him in the head, and he just kind of like, oh god, just thinking about it just gives me chills.
And you're right, to wrap it up there, right at the ending, and that scene and a couple more here that I just made a note on, it's why I totally respect your 5 out of 5 stars. There are some certain scenes in this movie that are absolute home runs, and I think that iconic death at the end, which over time will only become more iconic, like you say, a very, very memorable scene. For me, the tension in the Leo Damon chase out of that theater, right, out of the porno theater, was wildly intense and shot in a way with jumping between them and the lights and the cell phone and some of the shots of the heads turning, and then he's looking at them through the glass of the shops and in the reflection of the wind chime. It was shot beautifully. That scene was wildly intense.
It's because there's restraint in the movie, right? Like that scene is a really good example of that's really the only time that they came that close to each other. This whole time, they're nowhere near each other, or when they are, it's completely in passing. But that's when one of them's got the leg up on the other, and the other one doesn't realize it.
It's an edge of your seat moment, yeah.
A lot of time, well, like Catch Me If You Can is like another Leo movie, obviously, but it's the exact opposite, where he's like, I'm over here, like come get me, and he's chasing him the entire time. This movie is the opposite, where you got that one chance, like you gotta get him, and he lets him slip, and it's just like, oh
yeah,
man.
it's a huge tease, like Ross and Rachel almost getting together, and then
it's exactly like
another
Friends.
season. Yes,
it's identical.
Exactly. And then the other one, just the last one I want to mention in terms of home run scenes and great filmmaking. The performances are great, the direction was great, the timing, the audio, like all of it, is the phone call right after Queen's death. When Damon calls,
God.
How long is there no speaking? Now although I demanded this movie and I seized control with my remote and checked the timing, I did not do it on this scene, but how long is there with no speaking?
I don't know, but I'll
when
say
they
in
speak
the number of heartbeats, 0 heartbeats.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely,
it is heartfelt.
It is peak filmmaking.
I actually know. I'm glad you brought that up because I remember my jaw was open. I was like, and I know what happens.
Yeah, you've seen the movie many times.
Yeah, I'm like, what's gonna happen? Who's gonna say something? What would I do if I received a phone call from a dead guy? And then, and that's again where I start to have even more appreciation for Matt Damon's character, because Leo calls him back. Matt Damon picks up, right? And Matt Damon just like fits right in. He's like, oh yeah, I'm a cop. Play the role of the cop instead of playing the role of like, who is this? And bring him in. And then there's a little bit more distrust. I mean, every decision it makes sense. Every character is so smart in this movie, or the characters who should be smart are very smart in this. And they all get what's coming to them in the end. One last thing that I wanted to bring up too is I talked at the start in terms of the violence. I've seen some pretty gritty movies. I've seen some very violent movies. And a lot of times you're just like, oh, that guy got his arm chopped off. That sucks. Every single time somebody got punched in the face, or if they had like a broken arm and they got it smashed with a boot, every punch, the word is visceral and it's very much overused. But even when in that scene that you're talking about where they're chasing each other and he's hiding around the corner and he turns and he stabs the
delivery guy.
Thank you. Yes, I didn't know what ethnicity it was.
Oh, I knew you were about to go there.
Yeah. No, he said, let's go for his job. Yeah. Even now, it's just like, God, that would hurt so much to be stabbed like that. Like the sound, like it's not the sound editing has a lot to do with it as well. So whenever he's something to get stabbed or punched in the face, or when Jack Nicholson, I mean, it's a little overdone when he gets shot and then he kind of does the whole like Jesus on a cross thing and he spits up. reminded me a little bit of when he like falls and crashes in Batman, and
Well, it's a mild
level.
imperfection. Again, it's what for me keeps it from going up into from a top 25 or top 50 movie, which is where I think it is, to a top 5 or top 10 movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a mild imperfection where I think even the filmmakers and the people in this movie thought that that was going to be the death we were going to remember.
Well, the
And
one I
it's
remember
not.
even more than that is it French, Mr. French?
French's death
His
was
death
probably
is
better than Nicholson.
awesome. Yeah,
But they're all clearly behind Damon's, and it's just that was a slight misjudgment of how much we cared about losing Jack Nicholson.
Before we close this thing off, how would you rather see him die?
Nicholson?
Jack Nicholson, yeah, sorry.
More publicly and uglier, in sort of a hands and knees, crawling, begging, pleading, embarrassing kind of way. I mean, he takes a shot at Damon at the end. I almost don't like that that gives him credit for figuring out that Damon has just turned on him, right? Like, Damon says, you're an FBI informant, but at that point, what reason does Nicholson have to believe that that's going to be a deal breaker for Damon?
Yeah.
He's had this kid in his clutches since he was 12 years old. Like, I would have liked it to be more shameful, a little more embarrassing.
See, and I don't like it when a character is kind of reduced to that. We talk about that with the Jungle Book, where Christopher Walken's character is reduced to something really terrible and a bumbling idiot. I like the fact that they both realized what the other person was up to. They had kind of a chance to kill each other, and I think I would play on that a little more. Like, maybe they have some sort of showdown. Although I also again, this movie is about restraint. It wasn't like this big over, like this crazy chase scene where I'm gonna get you again, and it was just totally authentic and impulsive. It was the moment that they realize this is what's happening, boom, you're dead.
I think we're definitely, I think we're definitely picking nits here. But I think one thing we can agree on is we're glad they didn't go with some type of blaze of glory, suicide by cop, slow motion while he takes automatic gunfire death. It was not that showy and that stage.
Yeah, I almost just wish he didn't spit up like that. Maybe that's
exactly.
Yeah.
So we have to end somewhere. I swear, I think this might be the longest episode we've ever done, and I'm so happy that we got to see a movie this good. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I hope you made it to the end, because we've got a little closing business to do here. That'll be the end of our discussion on Departed. But we need to go from here somewhere
there's
else.
So much more to go.
In 6 degrees, and I want to know where we're going to end up here. Sean's going to queue up the random number generator. We've got some suggestions from our friends on Twitter and from ourselves. We came up with a list of 6 movies, starting with a contribution from Sean. My second favorite movie of all time, A Few Good Men. If the random number generator picks number 1, I will be ecstatic. But this might be the best list of 6 movies we ever had. What else?
Okay, so the second movie is A Hunt for a Red October, which I'm just dying to watch something with Sean Connery. I cannot wait. I hope this is the one. I love that we can do this, because I hope this is what the random number generator picks. This is the one for me. Although this is such a great list, we can't lose.
Yeah, we'll be happy anywhere, right? Hunt for October is one of my personal favorites. I was excited to get an opportunity to put it on there because it feels like a small cast, even though we've got James Earl Jones. We could end up on The Sandlot or Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah. Or The Lion King.
We can go a lot of places, even if we don't need to go with Lincoln.
Let's go with The Lion King from there. I hope that this is it, because then from there we can go to like Die Hard.
Oh, beautiful.
I just love this game. So next is Good Will Hunting. And then,
number 3 on my all-time list. So if we end up on number 1 or number 3, I'm going to be dancing a jig.
By the way, I think we talked about this before. We need to start doing lists in our episodes as well. We can, especially if we don't have a whole lot to say about some of these movies. We got to do some more of these top 5 X whatever it is.
Next time we end up doing a Kingpin or something like that when we're playing 6 Degrees, yes, we will fill time with top 5s. And try and get some more from people on Twitter and Facebook. So yeah, Good Will Hunting was number 3, as you said. And then Jen sent us a great list of 3 on
Jen?
Twitter.
Thank you for listening.
Starting with a movie that maybe one of the movies I've seen just the most times, without speaking about how I feel about it, the most viewings in my life, it might be Ocean's 11.
That's because you don't know how to change the channel off of TBS.
that might be it. Broken remote.
Yeah. Then Three Kings and Up in the Air.
And amazing how you've got two Clooney performances here, and yet could not be more different. I am very much in for either of those, and like I say, wherever the 1 through 6 random number generator takes us, I will be super happy. So why don't you spin the wheel and let us know what we come up with, buddy?
I've spun the wheel. I've pressed the button 6 times. You're just going to have to trust me on this one. The number is number 2. Hunt for Red October.
Oh, that's why you said trust you, because you rigged that shit and you got the one you said you wanted. I am super ecstatic, like I say. Of all these movies, there is nothing here that I wouldn't be super pumped to watch. Maybe we can get Zachary to listen to an episode now that we're talking about one of his favorite movies. I'm super jacked to watch Hunt for Red October.
I think that I might watch this movie twice in a row. I haven't watched this movie in well over a decade. And I haven't done a Sean Connery impression in quite some time, so I want to bone up on that. So
Yeah, you might have to watch it twice. One of my favorite, I will say right off the top, one of my favorite filmmaking devices ever employed to do whatever it is. I think the first 4 to 6 minutes of this movie with subtitles and foreign language, and then to zoom in on the guy's mouth, have him switch to English, and pan out. Like, guys, you're just going to watch this movie through Google Translate. And the audience, how could you not go along with it?
Didn't they do that in Warcraft?
I honestly don't recall, but like I said, as soon as I watched that movie, I was done with it forever.
Totally did, but it did not work like this. That is so funny. This is very meta, this episode.
Absolutely. So for everybody who stuck with us this long, we love you. We thank you again for listening. Go watch The Hunt for Red October this week. And then get on your IMDb or go through your memory banks in your DVD collection. Send us your suggestions for what we can watch on next week's 6 Degrees. We got to stay a week ahead of this thing, even though we haven't watched Red October yet. We need suggestions for next week's episode. So hit us up at Gary T Movies on Twitter, at Sean Capri, or tweet the site at We the Nerdy. I think you've been given like diabolical autonomous control over the website's Twitter account now, so we can just fill it with Nerdflix and Nerdflix and Chill
nice.
Stuff.
That'll be our next.
And Nerdflix and Chicks. That's what we'll do when we can't make it, and we'll have 2 of our lady friends host for us. Nerdflix
Christine and Jen, you're up.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, go watch Hunt for Red October. Give us suggestions that connect to that for next week's 6 Degrees. And the last thing we got to do is pick a new movie. What's going to be the top line title of our episode?
Okay, I know which one I am looking forward to. The most is Finding Dory, but we also have Central Intelligence.
It's funny because I'm not guessing, I know Finding Dory is going to be a way better movie. And it's definitely the one that's going to crush at the box office and that most people will be talking about. I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those weeks where I see both of these movies. Mm-hmm. So, for these purposes, Finding Dory it is.
Yep.
Let's go see Finding Dory.
Both too.
Let's talk about Finding Dory. But I want to see Central Intelligence. I am down for, if it's anything like The Other Guys, which is a dumb cop movie that I really enjoyed. I like The Rock. I like Kevin Hart. I'm willing to go see this as well. So, doubleheader maybe?
Let's talk about plans right after we're done here, because we might have an opportunity.
Fantastic. Okay, so again, thanks everybody for listening. Hit us up on Twitter. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/WeTheNerdy. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Rate and review. Any comments are greatly appreciated. It's part of how we track how things are doing here, and we want you guys to get involved with these lists and what you want us to talk about. You want suggestions for top 5 lists, favorite actors, favorite movies from an actor. Send us everything you can. We love to hear from you guys.
Yep.
And then make sure you head over to WeTheNerdy.com, the site proper. Tons of good stuff going up there every day, and they've just been killing it. I've said it the last couple episodes, but rolling out boatloads of content and new content creators all the time. What do you got on the site this week, Sean?
My week has been filled with a video game conference called E3, so we've been doing a bunch of podcasts on We the Gamercast, so check that out. We had predictions and reactions for Xbox, Sony, and Nintendo, and all the rest. So if you've heard anything about Zelda or like anything like that, we've got a few of those episodes, and that's probably about it for me. All right, well, again, all I can say is thanks for watching, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Love you guys. Bye! Gary, we'll see you next week when we do another episode, and I'm still doing the